Good afternoon. Welcome back to another rendition of the B&H virtual event space. It is time to take a trip to the hottest place in the United States. And for that, we have brought you Gregory D'Agostino. Greg, welcome, man.
Thank you, Derek. Great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you back. I missed you last time. I was so psyched to host you, but I'm back. I'm here. I was supposed to be just coming back from my own trip to Death Valley, but it didn't work out that way. I ended up in Zion National Park. So today you're taking me there. The trip I didn't get to take this time around. So all of you out there watching, I want to welcome you from Facebook, live stream, YouTube. If you do have any questions, feel free to get them in. I'm going to turn it over to Greg because I know he has a lot of information. So Gregory, show is all yours.
Great. Thanks, Derek, Danny, Scott, and thank you, B&H. So today we've got a lot of photos to go through, and I'm going to start the share screen now. Okay, so welcome to Death Valley. It's a pretty spectacular place. And I want to go through some basics just to start with about equipment and some details about the location. So for starters, I was at Death Valley a couple of times for about a total of about 2 weeks. And on both of those trips, this is the gear that I used, Nikon, mostly Nikon equipment, Sigma, Gitzo 3-leg Mountaineer, Acrotech ball head. I actually am an ambassador for Acrotech, and the GXP is really a fantastic ball head. I'm not just saying that. I wouldn't work with them if I didn't think it was great. And the lever clamp is a cool thing to have, and I find it very, very quick and useful. And the rest is there is pretty obvious. If you want to use a flash or a flashlight for light painting, you could do that. I really didn't do too much of that. I tried it on the Playa with limited success. What to bring? Okay, obviously all your computer stuff. There's no cell phone service in Death Valley, so you'll want to consider bringing a satellite phone in case you're doing some serious hiking in remote areas where you could get stuck. If you're driving through, then you wouldn't need it. The usual car stuff, car charger. A magnetic compass is good because your cell phone's not going to work in most of the park. And flashlight, red filter in case other photographers around. Definitely sunscreen, as strong as you can get. And hat, like one of those Lawrence of Arabia kind of thing, protect your neck. Because again, the weather could be pretty brutal there, depending on the time of year. Bring lots of water, and I can't overestimate that. And I found it useful to bring a bunch of smaller bottles because sometimes you're not able to carry the big, heavy bottles. And you might even bring a lightweight chair, one of those that you can put in a small backpack and just throw around on your shoulder because sometimes you're in a place and you're standing there for a while, so it might be okay just to sit, take a break. Hiking boots, that's a pretty essential thing. And the snake scorpion protector, well, there are snakes and there are scorpions. And I'll show you the hiking boots and snake protector. The hiking boots on the right, just very hard, strong leather. On the left, they're made by Crackshot, and these are snake guards. It's an incredible product. I don't work for them, but it's an incredible product, and they're the only ones that guarantee that a snake is not going to get through there. The others say snake resistant. This says snake proof. So it worked like a charm. Okay, websites and apps. You want to plan ahead because again, no or marginal cell phone service in the park. But you want to be able to check the usual kind of stuff like the phase of the moon and the direction of the sun and things like that. So these are fairly standard websites. I often use yr.no for weather. That's from Norway, actually, but they're incredibly accurate weather forecasts all around the world. So how do you get to Death Valley? A couple of ways. You can go from usually, unless you're living locally, um, from Vegas and you see the routes, it's about a couple of hours, um, or from LA, which is about twice as long, about 4 hours. The 2 times that I went there, I went to Vegas. So getting around, as I said, no cell phone service in most of the park. Depending on where you go and the time of year you go, you may use a regular car, you may use a four-wheel drive, a Jeep. You can rent Jeeps there, serious Jeeps, I mean, and or hike. So it depends. They tell you in the park, and very prudently, that you shouldn't hike after 10 a.m. in the summer months, which, trust me, you take that seriously. Someone uh, just a couple of weeks ago, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, late July, um, uh, a 68-year-old man, I think he died hiking 12 miles. So because he underestimated the temperature and it was up to 118 and he hiked during the day, which not not a not a good thing to do in that because you dehydrate very quickly. And health professionals tell me also another thing that the proteins in your brain start breaking down when you're exposed too long to 100+ degree temperature. So got to be super careful there. The road conditions usually okay, but there are flash floods sometimes, and they could close roads. So you want to check with the website and you want to check with the park rangers. Okay, a few facts. Some of these are pretty stunning, actually. Um, so Death Valley in Southern California, it straddles Nevada. It's the largest national park in the contiguous 48 states. And Denali in Alaska is the only larger national park. So the length is about 140 miles north to south. According to the NPS, National Park Service website, it's almost 3.5 million acres, which land area. I don't know exactly how they calculate that up the side of mountains or whatever, but that's the acreage. And that translates to about 5347 square miles, which is pretty big. So to put that in context, you see Delaware and Rhode Island. It's bigger than Delaware and Rhode Island combined, bigger than Connecticut. Not that much smaller than Hawaii. And you see New Jersey, it's 1.5 times the size of Puerto Rico and 1/3 the size of Switzerland. So, and this is just a national park. So it gives you an idea of how large it is and how you can't possibly cover it all in one trip or 2 trips or 3 trips. You could spend weeks, months there and still have plenty to discover. So it's vast and it's spectacular. Weather. Here's where it gets really interesting. So it holds the record. It's disputed the 1913 record of 134 Fahrenheit. But last year, at 130 degrees Fahrenheit, that is for sure on August 16, 2020. So the next statistics, I didn't do a scientific study here, but what I did was I randomly went to the weather almanac and I looked at the temperatures. Just picked random years within the last, I don't know, 20 or 25 years or so. And sure enough, each year there were about 160 to 170 days of 100+ temperature. And that's not even counting the days that are 98 and 99. So that's like almost half the year is 100 and 100+, which is pretty extraordinary. 30 to 40 days each year of 120+ temperature, average 2 inches of rainfall a year. The humidity is much lower than it would be anywhere else. So you don't have that uncomfortable feeling like you do for those who live or have been to New York. You know that it can get very steamy in the summer. And very uncomfortable, even if it's only 85 or 90 degrees, because it's 80% humidity and it's awful. But there, it's very dry. You feel like you're being baked alive, but it's not as uncomfortable in an odd sort of way. Okay, it also in Death Valley is the lowest point in North America, which is bad water. You'll see some photos of that soon. That's the Salt Flats. It's 280 feet, 82 feet below sea level. The highest point is Telescope Peak at 11,043. That's part of the Panamint Range. And from there, you can see Mount Whitney, which is the highest peak at 14,500 feet. That's the highest peak in the 48 states. So floods can be pretty devastating. Scotty's Castle and Scotty's Castle Road remains closed. From a flash flood in 2016, they're still doing repairs. And for those of you who know that I'm a musician, I'm an organist, I am interested in when Scotty's Castle is going to open up again, because there actually is a pipe organ in Scotty's Castle. So that's cool, and hopefully someday I'll get to play it. Now, this is important. The International Dark Sky Association, they've designated as a gold tier designated park. So it's got the highest rating of darkness. And for those of you who watched my webinar in January, you'll know that I've been to some pretty dark places, like north of the Arctic Circle. And I can tell you, Death Valley has spots that are really, really pretty dark. Nevertheless, light pollution is always an issue. And so they're very proud of that, but very watchful about the encroaching lights from cities not a couple of hundred miles away. You'd be surprised that actually can be seen. Okay, so there is the visitor center. Not exactly in the middle of the park, but close. And that's what it looks like from the satellite view. So you get an idea of the terrain. Pretty mountainous. And if you can see my mouse moving there, this is Death Valley. Literally Death Valley, because this is Panamint Valley. So what is Death Valley actually comprises various valleys, but the name of the whole park is called Death Valley National Park. So the boundaries, the Sierra Nevadas are to the east. So as I said, about 140 miles north to south. The Panamint Range is to the west, and the Amargosa Range is to the east, Grapevine to the north, and Owl's Head to the south. So just going back a second, so this is the Panamint here, and this is the Amargosa Range here. Okay, so there we are at the visitor center. This is the hottest I've experienced. Not that hot, actually. It gets way hotter there, but this is the hottest I've ever experienced in Death Valley. It was on June 1st. So we're going to pop around to various locations. As I said, this is sort of a primer because there's no way, you're going to cover everything in the park. It's just simply too vast, and I plan to go back again and again and discover more wondrous things about the place. So the Mesquite Dunes are very, very accessible. This is where they are. So again, you see, this is where my mouse is approximately where the visitor center is. So this is about, I don't know, about a 30-minute drive away, something like that. And it's the only dunes that allow what do they call it? Sandboarding. They're the same sandboarding. So, and there it is, the terrain. Now you can see the Mesquite Dunes up here, and these are the dunes. And there's a closer aerial shot of the dunes. And that's what they look like from the ground. This was pretty much the first view I had of the dunes on my very first trip. It was a beautiful fog rolling in, and it was just gorgeous. So I was approaching the dunes, and this is not that far in. And that's why you see all these footprints, because people do wander the dunes. This is the most popular one. You can pull off just by the road, as you could see from this. See, there's a road that goes right there, and there's a parking spot. So you can access them very easily, and that's why they're the most popular. Others are hard to get to. So they're very picturesque. And the more you wander in, the less you're going to see the footprints. Most people kind of take their selfies close to the edge, and that's about it. From the parking area, maybe you're walking, oh, I don't know, 500, 1,000 feet, not too much, and then you start to get to the very edge of the dunes. So there you get a sense of how vast they are. This is the largest uh, dunes of all. They, I think it's about seven square miles. I believe that's what the area is of these dunes, and that's a lot of sand. Um, so I'm going to toggle through some images. This is typical of the Mesquite Dunes. Each of the dunes has its own kind of personality. I haven't been to all of them yet, almost, but I will eventually get to them all. Um, but the Mesquite Dunes have a shorter, a kind of a scalloped look to them, whereas the other dunes are, especially the Ibex and Panamint Dunes, Eureka Dunes too, just more on a massive scale. See plenty of crows around Death Valley. This is right by the entrance. So they have this little path there, right off the car park. And you see the dunes off in the distance. But you can get a little taste of the dunes by wandering in. I went in quite a bit. Now, this is from the highest point in the Mesquite Dunes, which is not super high. It's 100 feet, but it's a little bit of a hike to get there if if you're not used to doing that. What I noticed when I was hiking, this is why the good boots are important, and your snake guards too, because there are sidewinder rattlesnakes on the Mesquite Dunes. So you want to be careful with that. They hibernate in the winter, but they're out there in the summer. Well, I imagine they start reappearing in April or something like that. But in any case, you have to be careful. So this is the and scorpions too. So this is about from the peak. And by the way, I noticed that when I've looked at the weather there, it's incredible because not only do they have high temperatures, but there's an amazing spread. So from day to night, I've noticed spreads as much as 37 degrees, which is pretty wild. So there's some sand textures. This is also on the Mesquite. These are all Mesquite photos. Now you see a wide shot, and there's the highest point in the very corner there. You see it again. And the sand, it's amazing. The sand is not all of the same texture. So you have to, again, know what you're doing when you're hiking. Sometimes you find sand that you put your foot in and you can get some traction. And then you're getting up the side of a dune and all of a sudden it's like almost like water and you slip. So it's not all packed evenly, little tricky. Here you see at the peak, and normally it really is very pointy at the peaks, literally pointy. So this is the result of people walking on the top of the dunes. You see some wind blowing the sand off. Sometimes, especially for photographers, you want to be aware of this. Sometimes the wind can get very strong, and got to be careful for your equipment because sand not good. So could damage lenses and so forth. I'd love to photograph sand, heavy sand. Now I was coming back from the racetrack, which you're going to see later, but sure enough, I couldn't get to it in time to experience this, but I saw it from a distance, and you see the floating sand in the air. So there must have been a lot of wind on that day. Speaking of sidewinder rattlesnakes, there is some evidence of sidewinder rattlesnakes. Now you know why I wore these snake guards, because these were fresh tracks, and I don't know where that snake went, but was careful not to step on anything that looked like there was a lump in the sand. So, but there you go. This is again a view from the highest point, and the dunes can take on a lot of different kinds of personalities. Um, it's uh, it's just so relaxing and beautiful to see these images, and at different times of the day, the and the way the light and the shadows hit, and it's extraordinary. And you see weird things like this, just twigs sticking out of the sand. You could spend literally days shooting these things. As you can see, the looks can vary greatly, um, and it's just very voluptuous the way the folds of sand are shaped. This is a morning, I believe. I think that's the moon. Yeah, I think I was there all night, and that was the moon, and the sun was coming up. So there's a sunrise. So the area used to be so that's the Mesquite Dunes are in what is called Death Valley itself. That name of that valley is Death Valley, um, and and it used to be, you know, a long time ago, a lake bed, and so this is the some of the remnants, the cracked clay in the foreground. There's a shot with the of the dunes again, the morning light. I don't know if any park rangers are watching, but I think they don't allow dogs on the dunes, and this family had two of them, so I guess they get a demerit. Um, there's some more fog and the cracked clay. This is typical. You'll see these bushes here and there. Best not to sit near them or touch them. Um, Aside from not wanting to, wanting to respect the space and the land, animals could be living in there or hanging out. So you want to be careful about that. Still the Mesquite Dunes. Okay, now nearby the Mesquite Dunes is Mosaic Canyon. See, there's the Mesquite, and there's Stovepipe Wells, which is a small little town. By the way, there are not too many places to get gas in Death Valley, and it's expensive, way more expensive than it is outside the park. I believe that there are only three in Furnace Creek, which is the visitors area, Stovepipe Wells, which is right here, about 35 minutes, maybe 40 from the visitor center, and then further down in Panamint Springs, there's another gas station and a small inn and restaurant. So Mosaic Canyon has this marble-like stone, and you see it's amazing in this satellite view. You see the alluvial fans. This is just the wash of the sediments coming out from the canyon. It's incredible to see that in the aerial view. And this is what it looks like. This is very, very smooth. It's polished by flash floods, and you want to be careful in climbing these rocks, which I did to some extent, because they are so smooth and you can slip. So you got to know what you're doing. But it's a beautiful hike. All right, now Zabriskie Point is probably, that's got to be one of the most famous tourist spots, because in one of the main entrances of the park, you pass by. So of course everybody's going to want to go there, and you pull into a car park, and you walk up a, an elevated, gradually elevating staircase, and you get to the viewing point. So again, to put this in perspective, the Furnace Creek, the visitor centers are just around here, and that's about there. So that would be about a, I don't know, maybe a 15-minute drive, 10, 12-minute drive, something like that. Not that far at all. And there it is. You see the terrain. And we're also going to look at this artist palette, and of course, Badwater Basin. There's all the salt. So that's what Zabriskie Point looks like. It was named for a guy named Zabriskie, Christian Zabriskie. He worked for a borax company, and there was borax mining many years ago in the park. So what you're looking at now, this is the Panamint Range. So we're looking west, and this you see a little bit over here. This is Badwater, the salt, and this point is called Manly Beacon. It was actually named for a guy named Manly, who was one of the 49ers, the gold rush in 1849. A lot of history in this park, and there's some really heartbreaking stories about the pioneers that went through the park, and some of them didn't make it. And legend has it that that's why the park has its name, because it's a kind of a complicated thing. The parties coming from, I think, Ohio, Indiana, whatever, they were going for gold, and they came with their men, women, children, and they came with their wagons and so forth, and then they got to Death Valley. So that's obviously posed some problems, and they split up in various. One guide went one way, one guide went another. Anyway, in at least one of the groups, a person died, and on the way out, legend has it that one of the survivors turned towards the valley and said, "Goodbye, Death Valley." So supposedly that's where it got its name. These hills here were shaped by powerful water long time ago, but they're very muscular and striking looking. This is a path down, walking away on the side. If you can actually go all the way down to the basin level, if you go that far. And this is on that one of the ways to get there. There's other ways. So you see it again. There's the Panamint Range, and there's the basin. So this is on that. I normally don't. I'm a little camera shy, but there I am in shadow. So this is further down that path, and you see this is all part of the Zabriskie Point, and this is amazing cloud formation. And there's a hiker who went far and disappeared. I mean, he sort of wound his way into, I think he probably was headed down all the way to the basin. This is a morning, and the colors, this is not processed. I mean, this is what it looked like. And that's what the morning looks like in the other direction. So this is, the previous one was facing east. This is facing west. There's, by the way, there's, this is the Panamint. This is that Manly Beacon that I was talking about. Artist palette. Okay, so we saw that not too far, moving in the direction of, on Badwater Road, in direction of the Badwater Basin. And there you see it. You can actually make a drive. This has got to be, along with Zabriskie, one of the easiest places to visit, and worth seeing. You could get out and hike, certainly, but you don't have to. You can actually go here without even getting out of your car. There's a drive that goes around. And this is what it looks like as you are approaching. In other words, I'm facing north here. I'm facing towards the visitor center, and the entrance to to the artist palette is just behind me from this point of view. So when I went there, you see the artist palette in the background, and this was one of the first creatures that greeted me, a chuckwalla, which is an amazing lizard. He was enjoying this. This was on the day that it was 107 degrees. And so he was just chilling out, enjoying the sun, and then decided to look directly at me for a close-up. And now the interesting thing, I think, I'm not sure if it's when they're mating and or when they feel threatened, they do these kind of push-ups. So maybe because I was there, or there was a guy standing next to me, I'm not sure. It moved around and it did a couple of push-ups. And I got it. It got it with my iPhone. It's very blurry, but I want to show you how that looks. It's kind of amazing. And then he crawled back on top again. So this is what artist palette looks like, and it's these are from volcanic deposits, iron oxides, chloride, and that creates the rainbow effect. There's some more artist palette. This is the other direction of artist palette, sort of on the way out. And this is literally on the road going back to the Badwater Road. So now you're looking at, see the salt here, and this is the basin. There's some crepuscular light, and this is the Panamint Range, looking directly west. And this is Badwater Road. So we came, in our journey so far, we came from this direction. We saw the Mesquite Dunes, which is all the way in this direction, and then Zabriskie, which again is in this direction. Now we're going to go in this direction towards Badwater. So there it is. There's the road. You park, and then you got to hike. Depends on, you know, how much you want to see. Most people go out a little bit. I went out probably all the way around maybe here. And the first time I was there, I was lucky because it had rained a couple of weeks before. Rare for that place. And so I had there was water there and had some reflections you'll see in a moment. So you see, look, this is the salt. Amazing how that looks from above. Now, an interesting statistic that I mentioned before about the sea level. This is the place that's 282 feet below sea level. And you can see that it's literally salt. So this area of salt covers about 200 square miles. It's mostly salt, calcite, gypsum, and borax. One of the things they were mining there over many years in Death Valley. There's a close to the salt, a low angle shot. Now, this is not exactly the Devil's Golf Course. There's an area just around here, a little further north, called the Devil's Golf Course. And it looks like this, except a little more dense and intense. But they call it the Devil's Golf Course because obviously only the devil can play golf on this. And so just an interesting story. The first time I was there, I stayed until it was dark, and I was shooting the Milky Way and the water that was there from the rain. And so I was making my way back to the car, because I was about 1.5 miles away. And when it's dark, you really can't see very much. And I wandered in, not on this side, on the opposite side. So there's salt, a little salt in the middle, but then there's this muddy salt. And boy, was it muddy. I eventually got back to the road in my car, thankfully. So there you see the water, and there's the salt polygons. Just kind of an amazing effect. And this is not deep. I was standing right there. You're not going to do any harm to this place, as opposed to other areas of Death Valley where you where you have to be very, very careful, like in the playa. If it rains, you don't go there, or at least don't walk on it. You can look at it. Here, it's, I mean, obviously you want to be mindful of where you're going. You don't want to do anything inappropriate, but just gently walking and putting your tripod down and cleaning the salt off later is okay. And there, so this is looking sort of southwest, and this is looking north. And you could see the water there spreading over a vast area. And so I was there during the night, and I got that Milky Way shot with 2 shooting stars. Now we're going further south, all the way down to the Ibex Dunes, which is not very often visited. You can see it's way at the bottom of the park. And it takes a bit to get there. You need a 4-wheel drive. This is where we're getting into some serious driving and moderate hiking. To get from here, I took a path that instead of the quick route this way to Shoshone outside the park, I went to inside the park this way and wound through here, and then eventually came out that way. And from the visitor center to here, the edge was about 3.5 hours, maybe 3 hours, something like that. And then you get to Harry Wade Road, which is hardly a road. There's a little plaque, and it's called Harry Wade Road because it's amazing. That was one of the routes that the 49ers, one of the groups of the 49ers took to get out of the park. And that route, you could be in that very area, and it's kind of interesting to follow in those footsteps and realize what happened there 170 years ago. And then once you get on that cutoff, it gets very narrow in the beginning, so narrow that it didn't look to me like a car could pass in the opposite direction, and the dirt on the side goes up very high. So if somebody's coming in the opposite direction, I'm not quite sure what you would do, but since it's not often visited, it works out. So there you see the terrain, and these are the Ibex Dunes. And here is Saratoga Spring, which, by the way, I understand is named after Saratoga Springs in New York State. So there it is. After you get in that Harry Wade Road, it's a good 1.5 hour drive, depending. I mean, I went in the dark of night, so I didn't, I went there 2 or 3 times, and within a couple of days, I was scouting it out. But it takes a bit to get there, and then once you do go as far as you go, where you don't want your car to get stuck in sand, then you have to hike about 1 mile, maybe a little bit more. And this is approaching the Ibex Dunes, completely different shape than the Mesquite Dunes. And these dunes, I think as opposed to the Mesquite, which are like 100 feet tall, this is about 463 feet, the highest. You can see how massive they look. And there's some cracked clay again. The patterns on the sand are just amazing to see. And it renders beautifully in color and black and white. So they're nestled against the Saddle Peak Hills. That's what you're looking at here. And there used to be, years ago, an old talc mine, and that's what you're looking at here. And as I mentioned earlier, in Furnace Creek, there are remnants and ruins of an old borax mine. So you see that in various parts of Death Valley. And different kinds of sand. This was different. This felt incredibly soft, almost like cushion compared to this sand. Beautiful to walk on and touch and feel. And there you see the immense proportion of this. I think that's Owl's Head Mountain in the distance. That's the southern boundary that I mentioned earlier. And again, for a sense of scale, these little trees almost disappear in the huge dune. So on this dune exists, and I believe that's what this is the Mojave fringe-toed lizard. And they only live on this dune. This one wasn't living anymore on the dune, lived on the dune. But I did see a living one, and it was whitish, and I've never seen anything that small move that fast. It was like a race car. I didn't have time to pick up my camera. I mean, it literally ran about, I don't know, must have been a couple of 100 feet, and then just disappeared right into the sand. It was breathtaking to see. And they live on these dunes, the ibex dunes, way in the south. As long as you're down there in the ibex dunes area, you could pay a visit to Saratoga Spring, which I mentioned, is in that location. When I was here, this is in the winter, so there wasn't much wildlife there, but normally in the springtime, I understand there's all sorts of wildlife, birds and such. In any case, beautiful area. Pupfish, these amazing fish that, I mean, they're primordial. They survive the freezing waters and the 130-degree heat. So this is in the area of around the Furnace Creek, Mesquite, the Stovepipe Wells area. So it's cool to see those little. They very hard to photograph. First of all, they disappear into the water very easily, and they move so fast. I mean, it's just impossible to focus on them. So now Panamint Dunes, we're moving to the north of where, see, we were down here, now we're over here in the middle and west part. Okay, so this is Panamint Springs, and the Panamint Dunes are here. They are the only dunes. Now you see, there they are. And there they are, again, this star kind of shape. Now, when you are approaching the dunes, it's a bit of a trek because you've got a long drive on a dirt road, and then you've got a 3-mile hike uphill. And you see these holes, and these holes, this was in the winter, so I wasn't too afraid. But any other time, that's why you want to wear your snake guards. But they have, desert rats, snakes, all sorts of creatures live in these holes. And I can tell you, having been there, that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of these holes. So, got to be careful. And there's some evidence of things crawling around. I don't know what that is, scorpions, snakes, but not people. So now look at this. These are the only dunes, it's amazing. These are the only dunes that are up on a ledge, like a shelf. You see how it's going up? And this is why now I stepped out of the car and driving around, you gotta go around this I forget what this is Lake Hill, I think. And then these are Hunter Mountains. And you drive around here, and then there's a point where you can't go any further and you have to hike uphill. So the first part of the hike is very rocky and sharp rocks. And then you eventually get here. It's an arduous hike, probably the hardest hike to any dunes in the park. And you've got to take water and really be prepared and know what you're doing because you could dehydrate very quickly. And they're finally approaching the dunes. And again, they have their own personality, just like all the others. This is looking out. Now we are looking into Panamint Valley. And there you see, I think that's scorpion tracks. I could be wrong, but I think that's what that is. This, I don't know, maybe a bird. Now, amazingly, in this area, Um, you know that they do these Star Wars trainings of the fighter jets. This is where they do it, in Death Valley, in Panamint Valley. And I was atop one of the highest dunes of the Panamint dunes. And this fighter jet came by. It was literally below me, and zipped across the whole valley. You hear this rumbling, and then you look, and it's obviously it's ahead of its sound. So, but there's a spot, I'll show you in a second. There's a spot where people go to see them fly through this canyon. And photographers get their chairs and they wait there all day. This is another texture of the Panamint dunes, more Panamint dunes. And this is from Father Crowley's point. This is where the planes, the jet planes, go through here. A couple of years ago, one of them crashed. So it's not an easy canyon to fly through. And this is the valley. So over tucked in here is where the Panamint dunes are. The crater, Ubehebe crater. So now we're way up here. And there it is. There's a view from above. And that's what it looks like. This was, you know, unlike other places in the park, which are from millions of years ago, this is formed just 2,000 years ago. And it's just basically molten rock and turned the groundwater to steam that eventually exploded and spread out over a 6-mile area, 150 feet deep. This is 500 feet deep here, and it's a half-mile wide. And you could see somebody who hiked to the bottom, how steep the incline is. And this doggy did walk too, not by himself. Not my dog. And there's the surrounding volcanic, or you know, the result of the explosion that caused the crater. I mean, it's quite black. And so from there, you can go to the racetrack, although you really need a serious Jeep. And that's the famous Moving Stones area. And there's the racetrack. It takes it's 27 miles, and it's not easy. This gives you an idea of how the road goes. Yeah, so about 2.5 hours of that. And you see beautiful things like Joshua trees, and you wind through the mountains. There's the top of a Joshua tree. And then you get to the playa, which is a very beautiful and zen place. You have to be there to totally understand it, but it's just absolutely ravishing. This is the grandstand. They call it the grandstand. It's quartz, monzonite, I think, in the center of the playa. The playa is actually about 1,000 feet thick, deep, and it's 3 miles wide and about maybe 1.5 miles. I mean, long, 3 miles long and about 1.5 miles wide. And from end to end, the level varies only 1.5 inches. And this is what it looks like in the area with the moving stones. And I'll explain in a moment how the stones move. So the playas, and again, I stress that the parks advises and asks seriously, do not walk on this after a rain, because it will leave footprints, and those footprints will be there for years. So every now and then some disrespectful person comes along and messes it up, and the park rangers have to fix it. Now, these are American avocets, which the park rangers tell me are very uncommon on the playa. They're usually on the golf course near the visitor center. But I found them one morning at a sunrise, and they were squeaking and drinking water. These are one of the moving rocks. And the way this happens, I'll explain this. This is kind of amazing. They didn't know for years how these trails were formed. And they had all sorts of theories, but this is the way it works. Eventually, these scientists figured it out. They put GPS devices and so forth. And what happens is, in those rare winters, when it rains, Then overnight, the water freezes, but only the top layer. So the top layer of ice with water, cold water beneath it. And the ice, of course, will wrap itself around the rocks, wherever the rocks are, because it's maybe around that level, right? So in the morning, it's not from wind, and it's not anything like that that causes the trails. In the morning, the sun cracks the ice, and these huge ice sheets start moving, and they drag the rocks that are embedded in the ice. And at some point, the ice starts melting, and the rocks break away, and that's where the trail ends. It's just amazing to see this. And that's a typical look. There, by the way, is the grandstand. You see it all the way back there? Maybe a mile and a half away. And this is one of my favorite shots, the Milky Way with two rocks and their trails. And that's the show. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll take your questions now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gregory. Looking at your images and hearing all the information, I'm partly glad that I didn't get out there, because now I wanted to see your presentation first, but it did make me miss being out there. So we'll jump right into the questions. Illumographic, who's watching on YouTube, says, what is your best tip for finding compositions for landscape photography?
That's a tough one. I mean, usually some people try to, plan everything out meticulously. I plan to a point. I like to know the direction of the sun, if I can. But to be honest with you, I like exploring, and I find an area that I enjoy, and then I just work it. I just work it, and the thing is that, to be honest, if you get lucky, you'll get a great shot maybe the first time. But the best shots come from going back to a place, visiting it, revisiting it, and getting to know it. And in that way, you start to understand what it's all about. And that's why I've been there, for two trips for a couple of weeks. That's nothing. I mean, I've got a lot of images, and I feel like I'm familiar with the park to some extent, but I'm just scratching the surface, and I know that. And so the tip I would say is, connect with your location, if you know what I mean. Just try to listen to it. Let it tell you something about itself. And rather than going there and saying, I want to shoot this or I want to shoot that. I think if you go to a location and try to be in sync with it, that's the best thing you could do. And then, having some knowledge about the time of day, or certain areas that you might want to shoot, that always helps. But if you go in looking at other people's pictures, and that's your plan, then your picture is going to look like everybody else's pictures. So the best thing to do is to go with fresh eyes and to find a location that you want to work, and look at it on a macro scale and on a micro scale, and just work it.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. I think you have to know everything about a place, especially a place like Death Valley. You're not going to get out there all the time, and there's so much to cover there. You have to maximize your time there. And
it's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. And another thing that I didn't mention is that it takes so long to get everywhere. And the first time, I'll give you a little tip that I forgot to mention. The first time I went there, I booked a couple of places right outside the park to stay. I was in two locations because I thought I'll hit the southern part and then the center and the northern part. And these places said, we're right outside the park. Yeah, that's like saying right outside the state of Connecticut or something. It's like, it was useless. Every time I was finding myself having to drive an hour and a half or 2 hours to get anywhere. And so my advice is either go with a camper and use their campsites respectfully, or stay inside the park. Because if you stay, I'm not knocking the places. They were very nice and very friendly, but if you're going to shoot, look at the places I've described. I mean, it takes hours to get to, even if you're right there, even if you're in the park. So why add another 2 hours? It's just, in other words, if you want to shoot the sunrise in, let's say, Panamint Dunes, right? You have to, and you're outside the park, you got to leave at like 11, 12 at night to shoot
Mm.
the sunrise. And remember, you're
Now,
doing everything in the dark, including navigating the snakes.
and one thing that came up on my recent trip to Zion, and I'm sure it applies in some way, shape, or form to Death Valley and a lot of these natural landscapes, is you really have to be in the right place if you plan on shooting something like sunrise or sunset, because if you get caught behind a mountain range, that's it. You could have hiked 2 hours to not see a
That's
sunset.
right. That's why I said know the direction of the sun, know where things are, where there are blockages, what gets the best light. The park rangers can help you to some extent, and things like the apps that I've mentioned, the photographers of FEMS, they can help a lot. But
Mhm.
in the end, once you know that, that doesn't tell you the exact location, because the devil is in the details, and you're gonna see all of this stuff when you go there. That's why I say plan it and then stay open to what your environment is telling you. You can only plan so much. I find that the best way to go, because that way I'm looking and I'm in the moment. I'm experiencing the place rather than checking off a list and saying, I've got to shoot this and I've got to shoot that. It's like, and I could be missing the most beautiful thing.
Definitely. Now, Bob, who's joining us on Zoom, asks, what is the best time of year and what is the best time of day for artist palette?
Yeah. Best time of day for artist palette is like afternoon, like 4, 5, 6, around that time. That's the best time. The best time of year, it's mostly sunny there. you know, that was one thing that was a little bit of a drag. We got some clouds in some of these shots, but you look on your phone. I mean, frequently, because I keep track of the weather, and you look on your phone, it just has sun, 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 sun. It's frequently no clouds at all. So if you're lucky, you'll get some clouds because they're really nice to have in shots, but that's the luck of the draw. Just like when I went there that first time, there was water in bad water, right? When it had rained. So time of year, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to hike around a lot, then I would say go in December, January, February. If you don't want to hike a lot and you want to just kind of do limited, things, you go to your car and move out a little bit, then you can go a little later. No matter what you do, you want to be very careful when you get into the like May, June. It's already 100 degrees in April. So you really want to be careful with that and bring a lot of water. I cannot stress that enough, because when I went to Panamint, I took 3 bottles of water, and okay, I'll tell you, this is a short story, but I had my ball head, and I was so tired coming back, and I drank my last bit of water because that hike uphill was now 3 miles downhill. And to put it to be like from New Yorkers' point of view, okay, and not that we're the center of the world, but from a New Yorker's point of view, it's the equivalent of hiking uphill from the arc at NYU, up to Lincoln Center. That's like the equivalent. So you're doing that uphill. So now I take my last drink and I see the car is about a quarter of a mile away, and I'm now approaching the car, and I realized my bald head fell off because I was carrying my tripod upside down just to change my thing. It had rotated off. So I was damned if I was going to leave that there on the desert floor. And it would have ruined the rest of the trip because I've been taking more pictures, with the tripod. So I stood my tripod up, put my camera bag there, and retraced, which is tricky with the rocks and everything, but I found the ball head.
Oh my God.
And let me tell you, that warm gallon of water in the car never tasted better.
At that point, it's like, as long as it's water, you're good. It doesn't matter what the temperature
But
is.
that's why I'm saying you really budget the water and know what your hiking ability is. And when the park rangers tell you, this is serious hiking, you trust them. They know what they're talking about. And I'm telling you, I did it, so I know. You have to really pace yourself and be prepared.
Definitely. Now, Lucia is asking about all-terrain vehicles. So she asked particularly about on the playa, does a standard SUV work, or do you need something with special tires? But for
Well,
the park in
you
general,
do not drive on the playa at all. I mean, I think they'll murder you if you do that. No way. No, when you drive to the playa, there's the road to the playa, but you don't drive on the playa. So going to the playa, I can tell you, absolutely, you want a serious vehicle. I mean, a high clearance, heavy, duty wheels Jeep. When I was driving out there one time, I've been there a couple of times. I went out there once, and there was this elderly couple in a sort of a little van of a sort, and they were going very slow. And I told them, because I had been out there and before, and I told them, please be careful, because they're elderly, and I thought they were asking for trouble. I said, I don't know if this is a wise thing to do. On the way back, they weren't there, so they decided to turn back. You need a serious vehicle, and if it doesn't have high clearance and serious wheels, and preferably a spare tire and a satellite phone, because people have been known to get stuck. And if you go out there, people don't go out there that often. I mean, there are people, it depends on the time of year. When I was there, on one time, there was like only one other person, and it came in the middle of the night. So I was all alone for most of the day. And so if you're in need, you could really be in a bad way, and you'll have nobody, there's no cell phone service, and it's 27 miles on that bumpy road that you saw like that,
wow.
27 miles like that, which will take you about 2.5 hours. So because you're going, by the way, that video, I was going about 8 to 10 miles an hour there. It looks like it was faster, but it was 8 to 10 miles. And that's fast. You can't go any faster. So that's why it takes 2.5 hours. So you have to be super careful, and you need a high clearance vehicle, because if you get stuck, you either have a long walk or you're waiting for somebody. So that's why if it might be a good idea to have a satellite phone and a serious vehicle.
So do not take your rental car from Enterprise out there.
First of all, I got news for you. You're probably violating your contract. There's no way a rental car company would include that. I mean, this is serious. This is serious driving.
Do they have, Gregory? Do they have like outfits? I know a lot of when you go to a lot of national parks, they'll have places right outside where you can rent all terrain or rent Jeeps.
By the visitor center, they have a Jeep.
Okay,
they have a Jeep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not cheap. It's not cheap.
Jackie is asking about protecting your camera. So there's got to be a lot of sand, a lot of dust kicking up. Do you clean? Do you have any tips for either cleaning while you're out there? Do you minimize changing lenses? What's your normal protocol?
Right. Well, the changing, I didn't have to do much cleaning, because if when the sand was blowing, if I thought it was getting scary, I just put it close to my body, or I put the lens cap on, and I didn't have any problems. In a serious sandstorm, who knows? I wouldn't change the lens at all in a serious sandstorm. I did change lenses frequently, but there was no wind to speak of. So it's perfectly safe to do that, but don't do it when there's sand in the air. You're asking for trouble. You're going to get sand in your camera.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, Gregory, that was a great for anyone who hasn't been there, or anybody who has been there and didn't maximize their time there, like me. I wish I would have watched this 2 years ago, so I could have had some tips. I mean, I got the Mesquite Dunes, and it's pretty much it. There was another part, the part when you first enter, and it's all the white rocks, and it looks like you're on a set of Star Wars.
Probably before Zabriskie Point.
Yeah. So, but this was super informative. So I want to thank you, Gregory, for joining us again.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you. And thanks to B&H. Great store.
Always good. Great having you on. We're going to have to see where else we can get you to speak on. I know you've been all over the place. So everything from the city to the Arctic. So we'll circle back around and get you back on. We always love having you on the event space. So I want to thank you again, Gregory.
Thanks so much. And I'm glad you made it this time.
I know. Hey,
Good.
next time
It's
I'll be
nice to
back
have you
again.
here.
It's good. I know. It's great to watch it live and to get, be able to ask my own
Yeah,
questions
no, but
instead of watching the replay.
I've seen you host others, and you just, something came up last time, and you weren't able to make it. So it's cool to be doing this with you.
Yes, definitely. And hopefully one day we can get this to be an in-person thing. Maybe we get
Wouldn't
out
that
there and
be
do
nice
an
again?
live
Yeah,
workshop. I
yeah.
know. It'll
I've been to the event space many times, and with Brahmer there, and
yes.
that this is a little inside talk here. Dave Brahmer started, and so I've been coming to the event space for years. It's a great place.
And this is just a testament to Gregory to what we do. And there's a a wonderful group and community of photographers that has been cultivated through the event space. I know a lot of the photographers support each other, and you guys are out there shooting together and watching each other's events, and it's great to see the growth that everybody
Absolutely,
has through the
absolutely.
education that we
Bunch,
provide.
a
So
great bunch of guys. I've grown a lot by being around them.
definitely. Well, hey, look, that's why I can't complain about my job. I get free education every single day. So,
Good
but
gig.
yes, exactly. So I want to thank you again, Greg, and of course to all of our viewers, all of our event spacers out there, both new and old, and in person and virtual. We got it all covered here. Free education all the time on the B&H virtual event space. But that's all we have for you today. So huge thank you again to Gregory D'Agostino for joining us, and to all of our viewers out there across the globe. That's it. Another rendition in the books. Catch y'all next time.